Sources indicate to me that we are live.
And we're live. What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting YouTube channel, recapping the fourth round of the 2023 NFL Draft.
Our 2023 NFL Draft coverage is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. If you think you can run an NFL franchise and draft better than the 32 GMs that are doing it today, visit ultimate-gm.com to play the Ultimate NFL GM simulation game. Start your dynasty today. Joe, fourth round in the books. Had some quarterbacks come off the board.
Yeah, we sure did.
It's a really interesting storyline here. We weren't quite sure when that next wave was going to come. Saints kind of kickstarted trading up to go get Jake Haener and then Stetson Bennett and Aiden O'Connell. You surprised at the order these guys are coming off? You surprised it's this early on day 3? I think that we could probably start there for observations.
I guess I'm surprised by both. You know, I think that these are all backup type quarterbacks that, I don't know, are they better than Sam Howell, who was a 5th round pick last year? I feel like this is a little earlier than I was expecting them. I thought they'd be more late day 3 picks, and we got a little run here in the 4th round. And I mean, there's some fun, right? We got a couple of Fresno State guys in New Orleans with Jake Haener and Derek Carr. There's a lot of information coming out about Stetson Bennett from Georgia and how much Sean McVay really liked him, and they've landed him. And, you know, the Raiders is a team that's got Jimmy Garoppolo, but's not super committed to Jimmy Garoppolo, getting Aiden O'Connell, who, you know, has some love out there as well. So, I mean, it's interesting, but maybe a little earlier than I was expecting.
And, of course, the Raiders trading up for Aiden O'Connell as well. I think the real treat here, Joe, is that the Bills are going to make a pick while we're on the stream.
Oh, they've traded back. They moved back from 137 to 115 and picked up 215. So Brandon Beane couldn't not have a little extra pick here.
Wait,
to go.
They traded back from where?
They traded from 137. They go back to 150. And they pick up 215.
Oh, yeah, it ain't going to happen. You are relieved of your duties. You're going to be able to celebrate your pick off the clock then.
Yeah, so I figured it was going to be Jacqueline Roy, which would have been a big fart noise here if that was the pick. So we've avoided that moment. So,
hey, how good were the first 10 to 12 picks in the 4th round?
Really good. We're sitting there looking at these picks, and we're like, yep, thought that was a top 100 player. That one too. Oh, yep, that was another one. So the early on, and that's why we saw so much movement, right? It was like 3 trades,
the first 3 picks
before the
round even opened.
Yeah, I mean, that was really insane. But like Keely Ringo, Eagles, Georgia Bulldogs. I think that's a big storyline here in this 4th round, is them moving up for another Georgia Bulldog, and we'll talk about the skill set there, but also trading for DeAndre Swift to bolster their running back situation. So another Georgia Bulldog after they drafted 2 Georgia Bulldogs, after they drafted 2 Georgia Bulldogs the year before that.
So Saldiveri, Jacorian Bennett, Keely Ringo, Blake Freeland. I mean, the first 4 picks of this round were players that we thought were top 100 players. And, of course, we kind of chuckled when the round starts and those guys come off and say, oh, of course they just missed and hurt our score. And you had Jake Andrews with the Patriots, and then Adebawore and DeJuan Jones and Clark Phillips and Chandler Zavala, who had some fans, and Roschon Johnson. Like, literally the entire first half of this 4th round was players that I think a lot of people predictively thought we're going to go yesterday. So testament to the value and teams re-identifying those opportunities here. I think one back half of the round pick that I really like is Isaiah McGuire to the Browns. We've talked about that defensive line and them looking to find reinforcements to it, and not just interior run stuffers, but also other pass rushers. And I think McGuire, from a skill set and potential at this stage, is really intriguing value for Cleveland. And I'm interested to see if he's able to get his footing there, because the Browns will certainly, it feels like, have some opportunities to take some snaps.
Yeah, I mean, you think about Alex Wright kind of being that 3rd guy behind Myles Garrett and
McGuire.
Okoronkwo, right? So now you've got a toolsy player there to add into the mix. And so the Browns have been swinging for kind of this 3rd, 4th, 5th round defensive lineman, hoping to get a hit. I think Isaiah McGuire might give them their best chance. Really pretty good career at Missouri. If you really want to get excited about him, watch him against Georgia. I thought he gave Broderick Jones as many challenges as any player that he faced in college. So potential meaningful, at least rotational player there for Cleveland at a position of need.
Joe, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Does this woman miss?
No, Sue Ann is on it.
Dude, for all 3 days, Sue Ann's been one of the regulars in the chat, and Sue Ann we've been interacting with for a while, but I really enjoyed your thoughts throughout the weekend, Sue Ann. And Joe and I had this conversation. The Roschon Johnson choice versus no, they went unspectacular, but like sturdy build players on the defensive line with their 2 defensive tackles that they brought in. But as far as how ready they are to be impact players, I think Joe and I are probably on the same page. Joe, I don't want to speak for you, but when the Roschon Johnson pick came in, it was kind of like, oh, that's got a little. I'm a little more up in my chair for that pick for Chicago than some of the other guys who you see the vision and you understand why they pick those players between the 2 defensive tackles and Tyreek Stevenson, but you're not like head over heels like, wow, I think they got real disruptive penetrators that are really going to solve the issues that I think that they're going to have with just how soft they are up front coming into the draft.
Man, there's a lot of picks I want to get to. Do you want to close out this idea with DeAndre Swift going to the Eagles?
Sure.
Obviously a need, right? I mean, they needed help at running back. They had kind of Kenneth Gainwell, Boston Scott as their scheduled starters. Miles Sanders, now a Carolina Panther, provided them with a lot of production last year. DeAndre Swift is obviously toolsy. There's some promise there, but he's really been underwhelming for 3 seasons. And it's not just injuries that's kept him off the field. It's been his play. It's been very inconsistent. So you feel like Philly's going to be a spot that can maybe unlock his potential, but let's not act like Detroit wasn't a good situation last year with Ben Johnson, the offensive line, a really good offense. So contract year, you might get the best version of him. Maybe there's some value there, but I'm curious, but I'm not like through the moon here.
Somebody has to light a fire under him, right? And if Deuce Staley wasn't going to be able to do it,
right,
you don't feel great about too many other people who are going to figure that out. But I agree with you. I mean, between some early ball security type stuff for him, seems like he's consistently dinged up. I don't think he has illustrated consistent vision as a runner, and you kind of got a glimpse and taste of that in Hard Knocks, where Deuce Staley's losing his mind, asking him why he cut instead of just getting north and south and taking the gap that's available to him. The talent's always been there, and maybe Philly's the right spot. But Joe, as you said, that Detroit staff really had that offense humming down the stretch last year, and the ability to put it together through 3 seasons hasn't been there. I'm hoping that he does figure it out because he's a fun player. He's a gifted player. I think is he originally from Philly?
Yeah, I
remember that he's
yeah.
going home. So maybe that's what he needs. But I think appropriate value. I don't go head over heels with this addition for Philadelphia either. And I wouldn't sit here and say I think your running back issue is resolved.
Do you know who's thankful for DeAndre Swift? Jamal Williams.
Right.
How much opportunity did he get at this point in his career to go out and break the touchdown record for Detroit and parlay that into a nice little payday for him with the Saints? So, we'll see what happens with Swift in Philadelphia. I think, is this going to be the new Sammy Watkins? Not to take your talking point there,
analogy,
but is this the new Sammy Watkins where it's like, okay, this is the year it's going to come together? So, a pick that I love here in this 4th round is from the Indianapolis Colts at 110, Ade Adebawari out of Northwestern. Really good fit, I think, for that Gus Bradley defense that's willing to be penetration style. Yeah. And whether that's reducing him inside on some long and late downs, kind of playing him as probably a 5 tackle on base situations. I mean, this is 280 pounds. This is a 4.4 athlete. I mean, this is really, really good upside at a big time position for the Colts here in the 4th round. I expected him to go yesterday at the latest.
So I think we can probably goof on to some degree the fact that they took another toolsy offensive tackle. But I think when you look at, I obviously had Bernard Raymond, who stepped in the left tackle spot for them last year. And now they took Blake Freeland 4 spots in front. But if you look at what the Colts did with these consecutive picks, and they got Blake Freeland and Tommy Adebawari, you think about the physical package that each one of these guys, this is the kind of guys that you should be prioritizing, in my mind, early on day 3. because they have the uncoachables down. It's that they have the things that you can't teach from a physical skill set perspective. It's putting all the things together. And I think Adebawore was probably, I guess maybe the league thought he was a little bit of a tweener. And maybe that's part of why he fell. I certainly saw enough there that I wouldn't have had the apprehension at all, right? But the league very clearly did. A consensus across all 32 teams. They sent a pretty clear message when they all passed on him for 109 picks.
Yeah.
So, but the physical skill set of those two guys is, I think, a nice consistent theme. Ballard has done that. But they have to put it all together. And you can't just pick toolsy players and continue to pick toolsy players without the player development component coming together. And hopefully kind of the reinvigorated offense will help them do that, and they can stay healthier this year on that side of the ball.
Another player that is really unique that fell is DeJuan Jones, the offensive tackle out of Ohio State. He goes number 111 to the Cleveland Browns. Feels like really good value. I mean, DeJuan Jones, unbelievable length. He's a massive dude. He moves extremely well for his size. I thought he would go earlier. Tried to reach out and find some information there on perhaps why the slide happened. And the indications are that he really bombed the pre-draft process and didn't really maximize that window to impress teams. But I mean, maybe this is some big time motivation here for him to, fall a little bit. Cleveland's done well to maximize their offensive linemen. They've had injuries, right? I mean, for as good as this offensive line is, injuries has been a little bit of a challenge, and now they get at a minimum a very good depth player here in DeJuan Jones in the 4th round, who we all thought could go much earlier.
Hey, by the way, I know this is a 5th round pick, and we're putting the cart ahead of the horse here, but the Colts' next pick at 138 was Darius Rush. So talking about day 3 selections and raw physical skill sets.
Yeah. There's the 5th round recap, which will come up right after the 5th round, is getting interesting already with some of these quarterbacks that are going. But
yeah, we'll
keep the 4th round front and center here.
I'm sorry, I got eyes on 3 different spots. As far as DeJuan Jones, I still think that it's very surprising that there was no point in the 3rd round where any team decided the risk would be worth the reward. Now, for him to go in the first 10 picks or so of the 4th round, I would assume the message has been delivered, right?
Yeah, should be.
And then DeJuan Jones, we'll see how he handles that. And also, very interestingly enough, you think about that Cleveland offensive line, right? Is he going to play right away?
I wouldn't expect so. I mean,
probably not.
Jack Conklin and Jedrick Wills are your tackles.
And they re-upped Conklin.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got pillars on the interior offensive line between Bitonio and Wyatt Teller. And so I don't think there's enough musical chairs for him to get pushed into a spot right away. Well, this certainly feels like this might be a bit of a culture shock for DeJuan Jones with his transition to the pro game. And he's going to probably have to wait to play unless there's an injury or the team ultimately moves on from Jedrick Wills after this season and wants to transition and not get another big contract on that offensive line, which is probably smart. I think when you consider how much they're paying Teller and Conklin and Bitonio, positioning themselves to get a really good value at this structure for a player who would not have been there if these questions did not exist, I think potentially sets them up from a team building perspective to have a really nice pivot if they choose that's an appropriate thing to do.
Now, Kyle, there's a lot of picks I want to get into, but first, perhaps our friends, the reason we're here.
Ultimate Football GM. Our NFL draft coverage for 2023 is indeed brought to you by Ultimate Football GM, the mobile game that puts you in control of trying to create your own dynasty. If you've ever dreamed of being an NFL general manager, this game is definitely for you. I think it's an absolute blast to play. There's tons of strategy that is involved. You are responsible for managing every strategic aspect of a franchise, from the facilities to budgets to ticket prices to hiring coaches to free agency, salary cap, trading players, drafting players, dealing with injuries, all of the above, disciplining players, all in a challenging and realistic game world with Ultimate Football GM. It's free to play, and it's completely playable offline, which is my favorite thing about it. So if you're traveling, you don't have cell service, you could still hop on, Pop off a couple seasons if you want to, pop off a bunch of seasons if you want to. Our listeners here on Locked On can get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in all caps in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps in the game store. To download the game, visit ultimate-gm.com or find it in the app stores. That is ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. So where do you want to go next?
I want to go to the Washington Commanders. One of my favorite picks of the round is Braden Daniels, the offensive lineman from Utah, who I think can be a tackle. I think he can be a guard. I think he's got starter traits. And we've talked about Washington and some of the injuries that they've had on their offensive line and how that's derailed their offense a little bit. But also the fact that Charles Leno is a bit of an aging player at left tackle. And I know they have Sam Cosmi, but this is just another option. And I think that Daniels just has really good tape. And I think what I've really enjoyed about studying Utah over the last couple of years is gaining an appreciation for how translatable a lot of their offense is to the next level. And so, you know, they're going to have a guy here that's experienced run blocking like NFL players are asked to run block and rolling hips into contact and firing off the football. And, you know, the vertical passing game that you see at Utah, he's used to some of those vertical pass sets from playing inside and tackle. So I think versatility, I think he's got starter traits. I think this is a pick that we could look back on and feel like Washington got a potential quality starter here in the fourth round.
So I guess if I'm looking, you made a big deal about the legacy pick for the Steelers too. Would love to hear your thoughts on Nick Herbig as the latest addition for Pittsburgh.
Well, we got the Haywards, we got the Watts, we've got the Porters, and now we've got the Herbigs, right? They've got is it Nick is the guard that they have, and now they had Nate Herbig, and now they drafted Nick.
And now they have Nick.
They care about that. They're telling us they care a lot about that, and I'm not sure if you should. I don't know if it's good process. I have no idea. Like that shouldn't be a tiebreaker, right? If you have a bunch of players that are stacked similarly, you don't pick the one that just happens to have a brother on the team. But the Steelers do. They do care about it. And so Herbig's a player that I think is interesting in terms of versatility, where you can see him as a rush player. You can see him maybe stack linebacker from time to time. But, you know, Pittsburgh's kind of been successful with those types of players in the past. And so I think he just adds to this mix that they have. They certainly like picking players from Wisconsin, it seems like, at least, you know, a couple this year with Keanu Benton. Obviously, TJ Watt's a great player for them. But there's something to this legacy dynamic for Pittsburgh that they really care about.
Well, I think anytime you have relationships with players who have family members that are coming through the process, it's just another bullet point, right? It's another point of contact. It's somebody else that knows that player intimately, who can give you insight on the kind of human being that they are. So I'm not surprised that some teams really put a lot of weight in that. You know, not to make it about the team with all the stuff on the wall behind me, but I know a big part of them selecting Cam Smith at 51 is the general manager's son roomed with Cam Smith at South Carolina as a member of the football team.
Man, did you know that beforehand? This
No.
would have been destiny. Would have been a lock of the century.
Correct. So knew he was on the team, didn't know he was rooming with Cam Smith, but all of those in the pre-draft process, the more boxes you can check from we have a plethora of information that gives us the utmost confidence, and the guy can play. Like you'd be a fool to not take advantage of that. And you've seen Pittsburgh now do that across the last couple of years several times.
Pick that I would love to also talk about here is actually some wide receivers, but first Charlie Jones to the Cincinnati Bengals out of Purdue. Yeah. You want to get excited about Charlie Jones? Watch him against Syracuse. They had no answer. I mean, no answer for this guy. Unbelievable. Actually, a really fun football game to watch. But, you know, I don't know that Tyler Boyd's at the end, but I think there's a very natural potential transition that could happen there eventually, where you're going to have some big dollars invested in Chase and Higgins, and perhaps getting a value player that can be your slot when Tyler Boyd comes up. That makes a lot of sense. And we've seen Cincinnati be very intentional with some of their draft picks and getting ahead of these types of things. And I think this is just that next example of it. And it could be a situation where they get a meaningful weapon here that makes sense for their offense in Charlie Jones.
Yeah. Pretty underrated athlete, right? The joke will be sneaky athleticism, but he could always run, and you knew
Yeah.
that. And I think as a complementary weapon in that passing offense, with how they're capable of stretching and spacing the field vertically, having that kind of speed that can potentially work underneath routes crossing across the middle, I think that's the vision, right? I think that that's the pathway for Charlie Jones and potentially being a run after catch option who's drawing teams third and fourth coverage options. And if you get him free runs across the middle and he's not getting pressed the line of scrimmage, which he probably won't if he's in the slot, you can see how, I mean, Cincinnati's offense isn't the most challenging to figure out what they're going to try to do to you. The challenge is they have elite players that overwhelm you with their ability to do it. And now having Charlie Jones as a player to develop into that mix, maybe not we're expecting this year one, but year two, year three, as he develops as a player and they stay stable with that offensive vision with Joe Burrow and the coaching staff, could totally see this guy being a really nice niche player that the Bengals landed here in the fourth round.
We could celebrate the Minnesota Vikings drafting Jacqueline Roy and taking away from my next Bills draft doomsday scenario being a true thing. But I do think there's another.
They came
up,
right?
They said, we know the Bills want him at 150. We're going to come get him. Thank you. And I would like to say thank you to the Minnesota Vikings.
The new man on the Minnesota Vikings.
I love him. Jacqueline Roy. Give me a jersey. Another receiver pick. I mean, this is one of the steals of the fourth round to me. Tyler Scott goes to the Chicago Bears. What pick was that? 133.
That was like one of the last picks in the round.
Yes, dude. I love this pick. I think that, I mean, I know they have Emmanuel Mooney. Emmanuel. Is that right? Is that his first name?
Darnell Mooney.
Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney and DJ Moore. I'm like, where does that coming from? DJ Moore. But I think Tyler Scott is a guy that has really nice route running profile to all three levels of the field, but he's got pull away speed vertically. He's got yards after catch. I mean, I'm a big fan of him. And especially what we've been kind of talking about with the Bears. We know that a lot of what their identity is going to be offensively is running the football. And that's going to create for some challenging issues with how you defend the pass and the run against Chicago. And now you got another explosive option here for this passing game. I really like that selection.
How about who's left? Obviously, we're about 10 picks into the fifth round now, but we've got some significant names left. I asked you when we were watching the fourth round together unfold, who gets drafted first, Henry To'o or Noah Sewell? They're both still out there.
Yeah. I mean, you've got guys like Antonio Johnson out of Texas A&M, Cameron Mitchell to the Browns at 142, by the way. Jalen Duncan, Maryland. Luke Weipler, interior offensive lineman from Ohio State, is out there. Kyle Blue Kelly, corner from Stanford. I mean, there's some players here that once we get into the fifth round here, I feel like are players that you expected to go earlier. Even Jalen Redmond, a very toolsy player out of Oklahoma.
Yeah. Interior penetration type from Oklahoma. Hey, how about the backs too? And it's never a surprise when the backs slide. I know Israel Abanikanda just came off the board here to the Jets at 143, but be interesting what that means for Breece Hall and his recovery from his knee injury. But you got like Chase Brown still out here. I know McBride has some fans as well. Zach Evans. Eric Gray, pretty likable backs that I think in a vacuum you could have said if they went in the fourth round you wouldn't have batted an eye. But there's a surplus of those guys, and when there's a surplus of those guys and they're skill specific, what you end up getting is exactly what we have right now, and they're falling down the board a little bit. But for some of these teams that Carolina, who's Carolina got?
I love that. Yeah, it's Miles Sanders and then it's Chuba Hubbard. I'd love for them to get a back to go to be their number two. Did you mention Sean Tucker?
I did not mention Sean Tucker. No, I did not.
McIntosh. I mean, Trey Palmer still out there.
Evan Hull,
Northwestern. Yeah.
I mean, there's some good backs out there available. Alejandro wants to know who the Giants took in the fourth round. Did they pick? I don't believe they picked in this round. I don't have them down for selection.
Doesn't look like they did.
So you didn't miss anything, Alejandro, which is good news for you. Other names that I thought were interesting that are still on the board. Some players that had a lot of buzz that were kind of billed as like these big body players. You think about Andre Carter from Army. You think about J.L. Skinner from Boise State. These are guys that were really, really billed as, hey, they're really long, they're really toolsy. You put some weight on their frames. But I think the thing about both of those players when you saw them at the Senior Bowl is they are both pretty lean in the lower half and probably not ready to play at the pro level right now. So, Joe, is your house under control? No, it's not. Well, that's perfect because we're at about 30 minutes. We're getting close to the halfway point of the fifth round. So we're going to go ahead and roll out of here and let you guys get back to the fifth round. The Bills are obviously coming up on the clock. So we want Joe to be free to be able to do that. We're going to be back at the end of the fifth round for another 30-minute or so check-in. So come on back, hit subscribe to the channel. Thanks to Ultimate Football GM for their support of our coverage of the 2023 NFL Draft. Kyle Krabs, Joe Marino, Locked On NFL Scouting. Hope to see you on the next stream, which will come here in probably about, an hour and a half after pick 177. So we'll see you then.